The sound of the impact was dull and sickening. It was the sound of a boot connecting with a rib cage. Not a human rib cage. A dog's. Max, the German shepherd, let out a sharp, pained yelp before his body slammed against the white porch railings. He tried to get up, his back legs scrambling for purchase on the smooth painted wood, but he collapsed again with a low whine. Sarah Jenkins screamed, a sound of pure terror that was cut short as a hand clamped over her mouth. "You and your stupid mutt," Kyle Sterling hissed, his face just inches from hers. His breath was sour, a mix of stale coffee and arrogance. "You should have learned to keep your mouth shut." He shoved her backward. Sarah's head hit the front door with a heavy thud, and stars exploded behind her eyes. She slid down the door, her vision swimming. Through the haze, she saw Kyle raise his foot again, aiming for the downed dog. Bystanders watched from the sidewalk. A few held up their phones, the small black rectangles capturing the casual brutality of the moment. No one moved. No one spoke. In the town of Harmony Creek, the Sterling name was a shield that deflected consequences. A black pickup truck, old and slightly rusted but immaculately clean, screeched to a halt at the curb. The engine cut out, and the sudden silence was more profound than the noise it replaced. The driver's side door opened slowly. John Creed stepped out. He was not a large man, but he moved with a density that seemed to bend the space around him. His face was a mask of hard lines and quiet sorrow, etched by things seen and done in faraway deserts and mountains. He wore jeans and a plain gray t-shirt that did little to hide the coiled strength in his shoulders and arms. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, took in the scene with an unnerving stillness. He saw the girl on the ground, dazed and crying. He saw the boy, puffed up with the false confidence of inherited power, his foot still raised. And he saw the dog. He saw Max. Creed's breath hitched, a tiny, imperceptible falter in his iron control. He knew that dog. He had served with the man who had trained him, who had loved him. He had promised that man, Dave Jenkins, that he would look out for his family. A promise made over a crackling radio link moments before the world exploded. A promise he felt he had failed every single day since. Kyle Sterling finally noticed him. "What are you looking at, old man? Get out of here." Creed did not answer. He simply began to walk. His steps were measured, unhurried. Each footfall on the pavement was deliberate, a slow drumbeat counting down to a reckoning. The small crowd on the sidewalk parted for him as if he were a ghost. He walked up the short path to the porch. He stopped at the bottom step, his gaze fixed on Kyle. "Let go of the girl," he said. His voice was low, devoid of emotion, like gravel rolling over rock. It was not a request. Kyle laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Or what? You gonna do something?" Creed's eyes flickered to the dog, who was now trying to drag himself towards Sarah, leaving a small smear of blood on the white paint. The sight broke something loose inside him, a cold, controlled fury he had kept chained for years. He moved. It was not fast, not flashy. It was economical, efficient. He took one step up onto the porch. His left hand shot out and clamped around Kyle's wrist. His fingers found the nerve cluster with practiced ease. Kyle's hand spasmed open, releasing its grip on Sarah. A choked gasp escaped his lips as a fire of pure agony shot up his arm. His face went pale. "I said," Creed repeated, his voice unchanged. "Let go." He applied a fraction more pressure. Kyle's knees buckled, and he sank to the porch floor, whimpering, Creed released him. The boy scrambled backward, cradling his arm, his arrogance shattered and replaced by a primal fear. He looked at Creed not as a man, but as a monster that had just emerged from the shadows. Creed ignored him completely. He knelt beside Sarah, his movements gentle. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She pointed a trembling finger at the dog. "Max," she whispered. Creed moved to the German shepherd. He ran his hands over the dog's body, his touch firm but careful. He felt the broken ribs. Max licked his hand weakly, his tail giving a single pained thump against the wood. In the dog's deep brown eyes, Creed saw a flicker of recognition, a memory of a different man in a different uniform. "I know, boy," Creed murmured. "I've got you." He looked up then, his gaze sweeping over the silent onlookers and their phones, finally landing on the terrified face of Kyle Sterling. "Stitum, this ends today," he said, the words a quiet vow that hung in the air like the promise of a coming storm. He carefully gathered the injured dog into his arms. Max was heavy, a dead weight of pain and trust. Creed stood, cradling the animal as if it were a child. He looked at Sarah, who was now getting to her feet, her mother rushing out of the front door with a cry of alarm. "I'm taking him to the vet," Creed said to Sarah's mother, his voice softening slightly. "Stay with her." He turned and walked back toward his truck, leaving a stunned and silent tableau behind him. The engine roared to life, and the black pickup disappeared down the street. The silence it left behind was finally broken by Kyle Sterling, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "You have no idea who my father is," he shouted at the empty street. "You're all dead." But the threat felt hollow. The power had shifted. Something new had arrived in Harmony Creek, something that money could not buy and threats could not deter. Later that night, the phone in Creed's sparse apartment rang. He had just finished setting up a comfortable bed for Max, whose ribs were taped and who was now sleeping soundly, thanks to a dose of painkillers from the veterinarian. Creed answered. "Yes. Is this John Creed?" The voice was smooth, cultured, and dripping with condescension. It was the sound of a man who had never been told no. "Who is this?" "This is Richard Sterling. My son tells me you had an unfortunate encounter today." Creed said nothing. "Listen to me very carefully, Mr. Creed," Sterling continued, the politeness in his voice wearing thin. "My son is young. He makes mistakes. But we handle these things privately in this town. I have already spoken to the Jenkins family. I have made a very generous offer to compensate them for their inconvenience. And for their dog's medical bills, of course." "It's not about the money," Creed said. A sigh of exasperation came through the phone. "Everything is about the money. Everyone has a price. Name yours. I'll write a check, and you will disappear from my town and from this situation. It's the smart play." Creed looked over at the sleeping dog, at the gentle rise and fall of his bandaged chest. He thought of Sarah's terrified eyes. He thought of the promise he had made to her father. "You think you can buy your way out of this," Creed stated. It was not a question. "I know I can. That's how the world works." Creed was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was colder than a grave. "You have no idea what you've started." He hung up the phone. He walked over to a worn wooden footlocker in the corner of the room. He lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in foam, was a satellite phone, a small Pelican case of electronics, and a folded flag. He ignored them. He reached underneath a false bottom and pulled out a single dog-eared piece of paper. It was a list of names and numbers, the men of his former team, men who, like him, had made promises. He knew this would not be a fight he could win alone. The system was against him. The town was owned by the man he had just challenged. The next morning, Creed accompanied Sarah and her mother, Mary, to the Harmony Creek Police Department. The station was small and smelled of stale coffee and bleach. The officer at the desk looked at them with bored indifference until Mary mentioned the name Sterling. The officer's demeanor shifted instantly. He became wary, guarded. He ushered them into the office of the chief of police, a man named Frank Miller, whose gut strained the buttons of his uniform. Chief Miller listened to their story with a practiced expression of concern. He nodded in all the right places. He took notes, but his eyes were empty. "A teenage squabble," he said when they finished, setting his pen down. "Kyle is a good boy, head of the football team. Richard Sterling is a pillar of this community. I'm sure this is all a big misunderstanding." "He assaulted my daughter," Mary said, her voice trembling with anger. "He broke our dog's ribs. Your officer saw the vet report." "Boys will be boys," the chief said, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "And frankly, ma'am, a military dog like that, they can be aggressive. Maybe it was provoked." Creed, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "Max is a retired military working dog. He is more disciplined than any man in this building. He was defending a child." The chief's eyes narrowed, finally focusing on Creed. "And who are you?" "A friend of the family." "Well, friend of the family, I suggest you advise them to accept Mr. Sterling's generous offer. It will save everyone a lot of trouble." The threat was unspoken but clear. They left the station and went to the high school. The principal, a nervous man named Mr. Thompson, offered them the same placid refusal. He spoke of Kyle Sterling's academic scholarships and his bright future. He mentioned the new gymnasium, funded entirely by a donation from the Sterling Foundation. The message was the same everywhere they went. The system was not broken. It was owned. The harassment began that night. The tires on Mary's car were slashed. A can of red paint was thrown against their front door, the same door Sarah's head had hit. It looked like blood in the dim porch light. Creed spent the night on their couch, with Max lying on a rug at his feet. The dog, despite his injuries, would lift his head at every sound, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He was a guardian, broken but not defeated. The next day, the campaign moved online. Vicious rumors about Sarah appeared on social media, posted from anonymous accounts. Doctored photos, cruel lies. Her friends at school, fearful of being associated with her, began to avoid her. She walked the halls in a bubble of isolation and shame. Creed watched it all. He documented everything. He took pictures of the slashed tires, the painted door. He saved screenshots of the online posts, tracing the IP addresses when he could. Most led back to burner accounts, but the pattern was clear. It was an organized campaign of intimidation, designed to crush their will, to make them accept that they were powerless. Kyle and his friends escalated their torment in person. They would follow Sarah just far enough away to avoid direct confrontation. They would laugh. They would whisper loud enough for her to hear. They drove past her house at all hours, revving their engines, shouting obscenities from the safety of their cars. One afternoon, as Creed was walking Max slowly around the block for his recovery, Kyle's expensive sports car swerved toward them, forcing Creed to pull the dog back onto the sidewalk. Kyle and two of his friends laughed as they sped away. It was a minor act, a show of dominance. But for Creed, it was a confirmation. These people would not stop. They would continue to push until they broke something permanently. He would not let that happen. That night, he made the call. He used a burner phone he had purchased for cash 2 towns over. The voice on the other end was rough, awakened from sleep. "Yeah? Reaper, it's John." There was a pause. Then the voice sharpened, instantly awake and alert. "Creed, it's been a while. You okay? I need a favor." "Name it." There was no hesitation. In their world, you did not ask why. You just acted. Creed explained the situation. He kept it brief, tactical. The target, a wealthy, corrupt man named Richard Sterling. The objective, protect a fallen teammate's daughter and dismantle Sterling's network. "Systems compromised," Creed finished. "Local law enforcement is on his payroll." "Understood," Reaper said. "You need gear, support." "Both. And I need Doc's eyes. This guy's got a digital footprint. I want everything." "Consider it done. We'll be dark off-grid. Send us a location for a dead drop. We'll have a package for you in 24 hours. "One more thing," Creed said. "Dave's girl, Sarah. She's the center of this. She's strong, but they're trying to break her." "They won't," Reaper said, his voice hard as steel. "Not while you're there. And you're not alone anymore, brother." The line went dead. Creed felt a familiar calm settle over him. The pieces were moving. The hunt had begun. The next step was to find allies on the ground. His former teammates could provide tools and remote support, but he needed people inside Harmony Creek who were not afraid of Richard Sterling. He started with the local newspaper. He found a series of articles written over the past few years, all attempting to investigate Sterling's questionable business dealings. Each article was sharp, well-researched, but ended without a smoking gun. The byline on each was Alice Monroe. He found her at a small coffee shop, hunched over a laptop, looking tired but determined. He introduced himself simply as a source with information about Richard Sterling. Her eyes, weary from years of hitting brick walls, lit up with a cautious fire. "A lot of people say that," she said, her voice skeptical. "They usually get scared and back out." "I won't," Creed said. "I have evidence of witness intimidation, harassment, and a direct link to an assault Sterling is trying to cover up for his son." He laid out the story, providing her with the photos and screenshots he had collected. He did not give her names. Not yet. He needed to be sure he could trust her. She listened, her journalistic instincts kicking in. She asked sharp, pointed questions. She tested his story for holes. By the end, she was convinced. "Sterling has owned this town for 20 years, she said, leaning back in her chair. "He's buried stories, bought politicians, ruined careers. To go after him, you need more than this. You need something undeniable. And you need a lawyer who isn't afraid to get his hands dirty." "Do you know one?" Creed asked. Alice smiled for the first time. "I might. His name is Marcus Vance. He's a former Army JAG officer. Hates bullies more than anything. He does most of his work pro bono for veterans. He's the only lawyer in 3 counties who has ever tried to sue a Sterling-owned company." "Did he win?" "No, but he scared the hell out of them." Marcus Vance's office was above a hardware store, a cramped space filled with dusty law books and the faint smell of motor oil. Vance himself was a big man with a shaved head and a handshake that could crush walnuts. His eyes were intelligent and direct. Creed and Alice laid out the case. Vance listened without interruption, his hands steepled under his chin. "I've been waiting for a case like this," Vance said when they were done. "Sterling's untouchable because he isolates his victims. He pays them off. threatens them, makes them feel alone. The key is to find others. If we can establish a pattern of behavior, especially with his son, we can build a case that even a bought judge can't ignore. We think there are other girls, Alice said. Whispers, rumors, but no one has ever been willing to go on the record. Then we make them willing, Vance said, a predatory gleam in his eye. We offer them protection. We offer them a voice. We show them they're not alone. The alliance was formed. Creed, the silent protector. Alice, the crusading journalist. Vance, the pitbull lawyer. That night, Creed retrieved the package from the dead drop site, a hollowed-out tree in the woods outside of town. Inside was a marvel of covert technology. Miniature cameras, listening devices, a satellite uplink, and a ruggedized laptop preloaded with Doc's custom software. The war for Harmony Creek was about to go from a street fight to a full-blown intelligence operation. They started digging. Alice used her sources to pull financial records, looking for the telltale signs of hush money payments. Vance began a discreet search for past legal complaints against Kyle Sterling, even those that were dropped or settled out of court. Creed handled the surveillance. He placed a micro camera disguised as a rock in the bushes across from Sterling's mansion. He put a listening device in the public cafe where Sterling's cronies met for coffee. He became a ghost, moving through the town, watching, listening, gathering information. He learned that Sterling was growing agitated. The quiet, unyielding presence of Creed was something he had never encountered. His usual tools of money and fear were not working. In the recorded whispers of his men, Creed heard a new tone: uncertainty. They found their first breakthrough a week later. Vance uncovered a police report from 2 years prior. A teenage girl had accused Kyle Sterling of assault after a party. The report was thin on details, and the charges were dropped a day later when the girl's family suddenly moved out of state. Her father worked at Sterling's factory, Alice said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. He was promoted to a management position at a plant in Oregon a week after the charges were dropped. The family bought a new house, paid in cash. It's the pattern, Vance said, slamming his hand on the desk. Pay them off. Get them out of town. Silence. We need to talk to her, Creed said. Alice found the family. They were hesitant, terrified. The father still worked for a Sterling subsidiary. He was afraid of losing his job, of retaliation. Creed spoke to him, not as a tactician or a warrior, but as a father. He spoke of Dave Jenkins, of the promise he had made. He spoke of Sarah and what she was enduring. He did not pressure. He simply offered them a chance to do the right thing. We will protect you, he promised. Vance will handle the legal side. I will handle the security. Sterling will not be able to touch you. The father finally agreed to let them speak to his daughter. Her story was chillingly similar to Sarah's. The arrogance, the violence, the feeling of utter helplessness. As she spoke, a spark of defiance returned to her eyes. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with anger. She agreed to sign an affidavit. It was the first crack in Sterling's armor. But Sterling was not a man who waited for his enemies to strike. He felt the pressure building, and he decided to end it. The final assault came on a Friday night, under the cold, white lights of the high school football stadium. Sarah, feeling a surge of courage from the support of Creed and his new allies, had refused to hide. She had gone to the game with a friend. She was done being a victim. Creed had been watching from the shadows of the parking lot, but he lost sight of her in the crush of the crowd after the game. Kyle Sterling and 2 of his friends cornered her behind the bleachers. There were no phones this time, no witnesses. You should have taken the money. Kyle sneered, his face contorted in a mask of rage. My dad told you. He told your protector. Now you're going to learn a real lesson. Sarah backed away, her newfound courage faltering. Leave me alone. It's too late for that, he lunged. But Sarah was not the same girl he had shoved around on her porch. Creed had been teaching her basic self-defense, how to make her body a weapon, how to fight back. She fought. She kicked, she bit, she scratched. She raked her fingernails down his cheek, drawing blood, collecting his skin and DNA beneath her nails. It wasn't enough. He was bigger, stronger, and he was fueled by a sociopathic fury. He and his friends overpowered her. The beating was savage, personal. They left her lying on the cold, damp ground, unconscious and bleeding. Creed found her 10 minutes later. His search had grown more and more frantic, a cold dread coiling in his stomach. The sight of her small, broken body lying in the darkness broke through the last of his carefully constructed walls. The rage that came was not hot. It was glacial, a silent, absolute certainty that settled deep in his soul. He gently scooped her up, his mind a whirlwind of cold, precise calculations. He called for an ambulance, his voice calm and steady, betraying none of the storm raging within him. He sat in the sterile, white waiting room of the hospital while doctors worked on her. Mary Jenkins was there, weeping silently. Vance and Alice arrived, their faces grim. When the doctor finally came out, his report was stark. A concussion, a broken arm, multiple contusions. She would recover, physically. Creed stood up. He looked at Mary, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored her own. The rules just changed, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The by-the-book approach is over. This ends now. He walked out of the hospital and made 2 calls. The first was to Reaper. Full mobilization. I need everything you have. We are going tactical. The second was to a number he had not called in years. Detective Miller, a man he had met briefly during a joint operation overseas. Miller was a homicide detective in the state capital, a man known for his integrity, a man who couldn't be bought. Creed knew the local police were useless, but Miller was different. Miller, Creed said, I'm calling in a chit. The plan came together with terrifying speed and efficiency. It was a multi-pronged assault, designed not just to arrest the Sterlings, but to utterly dismantle their empire of fear. Doc, Creed's former team's tech specialist, went to work. He had been monitoring the town's digital infrastructure. He found what he was looking for in the cloud account of one of the teenagers who had filmed the first assault on his phone. The boy had deleted the video, terrified of repercussions, but he hadn't deleted it from the cloud. Doc recovered it. The video was crystal clear. It showed everything. Kyle Sterling shoving Sarah, the brutal kick that broke Max's ribs, the faces of the silent bystanders. It was the smoking gun. Alice Monroe worked through the night, writing the story of her career. She wove together the new video evidence, the affidavit from the girl in Oregon, and the financial records showing the patterns of payoffs and intimidation. It was a meticulous, undeniable indictment of the Sterling family and the corrupt officials who enabled them. Vance prepared the legal documents, warrants, injunctions. He coordinated with Detective Miller, who was assembling a small, hand-picked team of state troopers he trusted. They would be the ones to make the arrests, bypassing the compromised local police entirely. The target for the reveal was chosen with tactical precision: the annual Harmony Creek Founders Day Gala. It was the biggest social event of the year, a celebration of the town's history and community. And the keynote speaker, the guest of honor, was Richard Sterling. The night of the gala, the town's elite gathered in the grand ballroom of the Sterling-owned country club. They wore tuxedos and evening gowns, sipping champagne, oblivious to the storm about to break over their heads. Richard Sterling took the stage to thunderous applause. He stood at the podium, basking in the adoration of a town he believed he owned. Behind him was a massive projection screen, set to display a slideshow of his family's charitable contributions. "Harmony Creek is more than a town," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "It is a family, a community built on values, on integrity, on protecting our own." In a van parked a quarter-mile away, Doc typed a single command into his laptop. "Showtime." The slideshow behind Sterling flickered and died. For a moment, the screen was black. Then, an image appeared. It was the front porch of the Jenkins house. The crowd murmured in confusion. Then the video began to play. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as the brutal assault on Sarah Jenkins and her dog unfolded in high definition, 20 feet tall. The audio was pristine. Kyle's sneering voice, Sarah's scream, the sickening thud of the kick, the pained yelp from Max. Richard Sterling froze at the podium, his face ashen. He stared in horror at the screen, his perfect world crumbling around him. The video ended. It was replaced by the face of the girl from Oregon, giving her tearful testimony via a recorded deposition. Then came documents, bank statements highlighted in red, showing the money transfers, the payoffs. At the exact same moment, every phone in the room buzzed. A link to Alice Munro's article had just been sent out via a mass text. The story was live. The truth was out. The ballroom doors burst open. Detective Miller and his team of state troopers entered, their faces hard and professional. They moved through the shocked crowd, their eyes locked on the stage. "Richard Sterling," Miller's voice boomed through the silent room. "You are under arrest for bribery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy." Two troopers cuffed a catatonic Sterling at the podium. "Where is Kyle Sterling?" Miller demanded. A terrified teenager in the crowd pointed a shaking finger toward a side exit. Kyle was trying to slip away. Two more troopers intercepted him, slamming him against a wall with professional force. He was cuffed and read his rights, his arrogant sneer replaced by a look of pure panic. The operation was not over. Another team, led by a state lieutenant, was simultaneously raiding the police station. Chief Miller was arrested at his desk, caught in the middle of trying to shred documents. The principal, Mr. Thompson, was taken into custody at his home. The entire corrupt network was being dismantled in a single decisive stroke. Creed was not there to see it. He was at the hospital, sitting by Sarah's bedside. She was awake, watching the news coverage on her room's small television, her eyes wide. Max was lying on the floor beside the bed, his head resting on Creed's foot. He had refused to leave his side. Sarah looked at Creed, her one good hand reaching for his. "You did it," she whispered. "You kept your promise." "We did it," Creed corrected her gently. "Your courage made this happen. You fought back." He knew in that moment that his war was finally over. Not the one in the desert, but the one inside himself. The guilt, the feeling of failure. It was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. He had honored his friend. He had protected his family. The trials were swift. With the video evidence, the multiple testimonies, and the mountain of financial proof, the outcome was never in doubt. Richard Sterling, stripped of his power and influence, was found guilty on all counts. He received a sentence of 20 years in federal prison. His son, Kyle, was convicted of felony assault and sentenced to 10 years. The corrupt police chief and the principal received shorter but significant sentences for their roles in the cover-up. Justice, for once, was absolute. A few weeks after the sentencing, a young man came to the Jenkins house. He was one of the boys who had been with Kyle during the final assault behind the bleachers. He stood on the porch, his head bowed, twisting a baseball cap in his hands. Creed answered the door. "Sir," the boy mumbled, unable to meet his eyes. I came to apologize. To Sarah. I didn't help her. I just stood there. I was a coward." His testimony against Kyle had been a key part of the prosecution's case. He had come forward on his own the day after the arrests. Creed looked at him for a long moment. He saw not a monster, but a scared kid who had been caught in the orbit of a powerful bully and had made the wrong choice, then found the courage to make the right one. "She's in the back," Creed said, stepping aside. "Go tell her yourself." The apology was accepted. It was another small step in the long process of healing. Life in Harmony Creek began to change. The rot at its core had been cut out. People started talking to each other again, no longer looking over their shoulders in fear of the Sterling name. Creed found a new purpose. With funding from a Veterans Assistance Program and a heartfelt donation from Alice Munro's book advance, he started a nonprofit organization. He took in retired military working dogs, animals like Max, who were deemed too old or too troubled for adoption, and retrained them. He paired them with veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress, giving both the soldiers and the dogs a new mission, a new life. His first graduate was Max, who was now officially Sarah's dog, though his loyalty was equally divided between her and Creed. The final quiet moment came on a cool autumn evening, a year after it all began. Creed, Sarah, and Mary were sitting on the front porch swing. The porch had been rebuilt, the old stained wood replaced with fresh, clean planks. The red paint on the front door was gone, replaced by a cheerful blue. Sarah, her arm now fully healed, was throwing a tennis ball for Max on the front lawn. He would bound after it, his movements now free and painless, a picture of pure joy. She was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She was a different person now, not broken but forged stronger in the fire she had endured. Creed watched her, a sense of profound peace settling over him. He had come to this town a ghost, haunted by the past, disconnected from the world. He had been looking for a way to honor a fallen friend. Instead, he had found a family. He had found a home. He looked at the dog, the loyal guardian who had been the catalyst for it all. The dog everyone had feared, the broken veteran nobody wanted. Max had seen the good in him, had trusted him from the start. In rescuing the dog, Creed had created the conditions for the dog and the girl to rescue him right back. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Max trotted back to the porch, the tennis ball in his mouth, and laid his head on Creed's knee. Creed absently stroked the dog's soft ears. He was no longer adrift. He had a purpose. He was a protector. He was where he was supposed to be, and he was at peace.